So, we can start now. I think we have how many people have joined?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we will start actually. This is the conversation which is to celebrate the the very valuable input which our selected senior leaders have given in the creation of a Souvenir. And this idea we got from conversations with various groups. As you know, we are completing 75 years of India's independence. Everyone, everywhere, there are stories about how government projects have contributed in the last 75 years, how private sector has contributed in last 75 years. But somehow we realized that there are very few stories available in public domain about the contribution of the sector and where we are today. And interestingly, the government started calling it Amrit Mahotsav. And we realized that in the last 75 years, most of the jo Amrit Manthan hua, the wish has been taken by the sector itself. And now it's time to also talk about our share of Amrit in this whole Amrit Vela, which is there in front of us, what the government is saying again and again. Secondly, we also thought that the best way to tell the story of the sector would be the leaders of the sector. So if you see the list of the people who have contributed in this souvenir, they're exceptionally, very important people, and they have, though each and every one of you has contributed in your selected topics and it's like a whole life you all have given to those issues and also taking the whole country ahead. So we thought that we'll do this exercise. And now we have actually got a lot of material, and my colleague Shameen she worked on that. We have got some feedback from some of you regarding its layout, and the final thing we'll do it. We still have the space, and we'll do those. We'll make it better, look it better. So we have to start, and the objective of today's conversation is, even in the morning, Jensi was asking me, and even my colleagues were discussing. We don't have some sort of any specific agenda for conversation. What we thought of that if the people who are there today in this call, because they are themselves an institution, each one of you is institution in our point of view for the sector. So, and we are also trying to record this conversation that for the 5 or 10 minutes, if you can talk about on issues which you have written or anything which you feel can enlighten the public, enlighten the general community also, or all of you, all of us. So we can have that conversation. So there is no specific topics of conversation, but either you can talk about the issue in which you have written, or you can see and discuss any issue which you think is important in today's time for the sector. Because when we are writing about this 75 years of our independent journey till date, there is also future in front of us, and how future looks. We also have to see that how we can make use of the future which is there in front of the sector, in front of the country. So thank you. And may I ask my colleague Shameen to start?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Can you hear me? And very happy all of you have joined and you have shared your very valuable time with us. And the articles that you have submitted are all models for change. They are all replicable. Everybody can replicate them. They are all models of change. Usually when we get articles, they are usually research on what problems we face. But each and every article in this Souvenir is a suggestion, way forward. Anybody can replicate them. So it was exhilarating reading those articles, and I feel we need to disseminate it very widely so that people can read them. Now, for your information, I asked Mr. Dheeraj to just give us a glimpse of the Souvenir. Then we shall start, maybe with your approval. As per the contents go, listing of the contents. I request all the speakers to make their presentation, whatever they have written in the article. Instead of me, I myself was feeling like I should speak about those articles. They were so interesting, but I do not want to disclose the suspense. So I request everybody to speak about the articles and the models and suggestions that you have. Now I request 2-3 minutes, Mr. Dheeraj will just roll out. That is official releasing of the souvenir. Thank you. Dheeraj.
आवाज नहीं आ रहा है आवाज नहीं आ रहा है
नहीं आवाज नहीं आ रहा
I think she's not speaking anything, is she?
Ji sir, that was a brief glimpse of the souvenir. अब आवाज आ रही है?
बहुत कम आवाज आ रही है बहुत ही कम आवाज आ रही है
आ गई थोड़ी बहुत तो ठीक है
Thank you. This is the glimpse, and this is actually this whole souvenir is on the electronic format. So we will share it with larger community because sometimes having electronic product is much easier to share with larger community. We will do that, and we see that it is it's going to be a very important repository of the knowledge about the sector. So I would like to thank each and every contributor in this journey which we have started. As you know, we have also started making short video films of our senior leaders and experts, which are there in our website, in our YouTube channel also. So this is also part of that journey which we have started. So we will start now. Then I think, yeah. So we will start and we will take this whole sequence. How content is there in the. So may I request Sanjay ji? Sanjay. he wrote about boat cleaning. And we have always heard about those boat cleaning, innovation. And if you can talk about it, sir. And as I said, you can have 5 to 10 minutes, whatever you want to discuss. You can talk about boat cleaning or any other work of yours. You are most welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Harshji, and hello, everybody. I want to first wish everybody good health and wellness for the days ahead for the new year. I'm very far away from all of you. I'm in a place called the city of Aizawl in Mizoram. I'll talk very briefly, and thank you for giving me the chance to speak at the beginning because I have to leave the meeting in about 15-20 minutes. The town of Aizawl, where I am, is known for a high degree of cleanliness, but its roads are very narrow and its traffic jams are legendary. So even if you have to go a short distance, you have to prepare well in time. I've written about an initiative we took many years ago and which has grown into a best practices model about a very little known phenomenon in Assam. This is on the Brahmaputra River, which many of you have seen or traveled on, or at least flown over or traveled over. There is this unique phenomenon of islands. There are nearly 3,000 islands and about 30 lakh people. That's 1/8 or 1/9 of the population. Or 8% of the population of Assam lives on islands. This is not anywhere else, I think, in the country, very big places in the world. And the story actually begins when I came across an experience of or story of a young woman who died in childbirth on a boat, on a ferry, because she couldn't get to a hospital on time. And I did some research. I was working on a film at that time on the river, on the Brahmaputra. I did some research and found to my absolute horror that more women were dying. Assam had the worst MMR ratio in the country. It was 493 or so. And through conversations with people, I realized that it's a double whammy. It is just not just health exclusion, but also geographical and societal exclusion. And we felt that really the only way of dealing with this was to take the service to people, but not as an act of charity, but as an entitlement, as a right, because governments were not doing this. And we started very small with one boat. We won an award for an innovation, which is a boat of hope, a ship of hope in a valley of flood. And it started there. So we started with one boat in 2005 in one district. Today we have 15 boats. We have a team of 200 plus, including 2 doctors, 1 to 2 doctors on each boat. We work in 13 districts and we reach 250,000 people with sustained health care over the year. We do about 20 camps, and this has been possible because of a partnership with the National Health Mission in Assam and the government of Assam, and the fact that they have supported it completely over the past since 2008. Some of the boats are our own, so they are our capital assets, as it were. And this has been a partnership in which we run the program. The NHM has given the funding, but we do innovations as well. So we've looked at psychological issues of people who lose their homes 3 or 4 times in a year because of flooding. That's a major issue. We've taken better nutrition to the areas through interventions with the moringa, the drumstick plants, because nutrition levels are very poor. And we have added solar to the bouquet of applications, because I see the boat clinic, the innovation, as not a service in itself, but it is a platform for many applications. So innovations and many opportunities which are coming up. So we hope to increase this possibility, and we work without consideration of religion, ethnicity, language, or income. It is largely for BPL families, and I'm very glad that this is at least a best practice in good governance. It doesn't really matter which government is in power. It has gone beyond that stage. So this is something that we wanted to share with all of you. And the innovation starts with the boat itself, because, I don't even swim, but we were able to design this and make it effective, relevant, to reach many people. Of course, now with the climate change and the shrinking of water supply, we are having a problem in terms of, in the dry season, you have to even take dugouts, smaller boats, and it looks very romantic and sounds very romantic, but it's very tough work. Because often you have to walk 3-4 kilometers with the equipment and the team to the villages to carry this work forward and reach them. But this is really what many of you are all doing. It's reaching the last person and covering the last mile. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to listening to many others. Thank you, Harshi. I hope that's not too much time.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Thank you. It's a very path-breaking, way of providing health services to people who live in a very difficult area. And we have such locations in India, I think, and all of us have heard about your innovation project, but it's good that now we have a, what you can call it a story written by the person who initiated it. So I think it is going to help the future
But
generation.
may I apologize for interrupting you? I'll make a request and present an invitation that those of you who want to come and see it, please come. I can't afford to pay your fares, but or travel, but please come and see how it works, especially in the flood season, because that is the toughest time when they reach people. Thank you.
Right, sir. May I now request Ashok Khoslaji, because I think he's in Dhaka and he has to go for a conference. Sir, if you can, because you are here today and I could see you. Before you go to that meeting, if you can speak for some time, sir. Is it fine, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I am indeed in Dhaka. I'm sitting in a very nice conference little committee room in the International University of Bangladesh. They've been kind enough to provide me with an internet connection and a plug to plug my computer in. And I do have to go and give a keynote address downstairs in a little while. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you on civil society organizations. We produced a paper for the brochure that was written jointly by Vijay Mahajan, Rajesh Tandon, and myself. The major intellectual content came from my partners, and I think they did a terrific job in describing the importance and the potential of civil society for making India a truly great democracy. We basically take civil society to be a broad spectrum group of organizations, which are include what we call non-governmental organizations, faith and religious institutions, philanthropic foundations, science academies, universities, cultural societies like music and literacy groups, sports clubs, media, anybody who's not business or government, basically is civil society. If they choose to be, if they don't, if they feel that they're not part of civil society, that's up to them. but the contributions and the ability of this part of the sector of our economy and society is truly great and important. I personally can't imagine a democracy working without a vibrant and strong civil society. It's really like society is really like DNA. It has these three strands supporting each other, and they should make it possible for creative evolution of well-being for people and for the planet. And civil society is one of the three strands, like a triple helix. The civil society is the voice of the people. Of course, often elected representatives, parliamentarians, legislators, and so on, claim to be close to the people, and of course they are, otherwise they wouldn't get elected. But they have a very specific perception, lens through which they understand people's voices. And I don't think it would be true to say that it's all that is needed for good governance. Beyond what the elected representatives of the people can bring to governance, we need a much more sensitive understanding of the aspirations and the ability of people to look after their own futures. So civil society then is actually a critical factor in ensuring that civilization moves forward in a way that everyone will benefit. Major transformations that have taken place in society over the last couple of centuries all came from civil society, pretty well all of them, in the face of a lot of opposition from the normal establishments, which would include the public and private sectors. Universal suffrage, civil rights, human rights, gender equality, environmental issues, the right to information, and even the ability of social enterprise to do good and to be able to generate revenues are all ideas that were basically forced on government to legislate by civil society action. And what we value in life, a large part of it, environmental quality, the health and well-being of people, the education of people, and the role of the professions, for example, farming or grazing or indigenous people, tribals. These are all things that are actually nurtured for the first part of their growth by civil society. So I'm just interested in explaining the causes and the critical roles for NGOs and civil society organizations. And in the coming future, the big ones, the women's issues, the child welfare, the care of the aged, the care of disabled people, diseases, HIV, AIDS, COVID, and many other diseases, infectious and lifestyle diseases. These are all things that governments alone are not adequate to deal with and need strong supports from civil society. In the case of disasters, natural or otherwise, many times the first responders are local community-based organizations, and these are really fundamentally important as things change with climate, with biodiversity loss, with species extinction. These are things that are going to need a lot of attention from citizen groups. The future causes that we have to deal with, the ones that are coming up more and more, like climate change and biodiversity loss and change of lifestyles and the consumption patterns and the production systems and the management of our wastes, and even big economic issues like trade and aid are all basically in need of fundamental changes in value systems. And that is only going to come from civil society. That does not come from the top of people coming and saying, philosophically or ethically, we need to change. That comes from below by demand of citizens. The need to promote voluntary action is critical. The scaling up and the deepening of these issues and adoption of them by the public are extremely important. And civil society has a competitive advantage. It's usually less bureaucratic than others. It can be flexible, it can be systemic, it can be multidisciplinary, it can be transsectoral, and it responds more easily and quickly to demand, to what people need. And that competitive advantage needs to be nurtured. Even though civil society organizations are often critical of government policies, in a sense, inconvenient players in society from the point of view of the establishment, it is actually a privilege for a country like India to have such a strong, well-grounded, thoughtful civil society, which can actually inject better discipline for our governance systems. The key to a strong civil society seems to me to be to create and nurture local action. That is something that few others are equally good at. Mobilizing local initiatives, reliable local collaborations, monitoring and enforcing accountability, and the whole concept of the future, sustainability, and how that is important. The second issue that civil society organizations need to project, need to be and to project is accountability and transparency in their own function. And of course, you know, we've got together with civil society organizations and set up mechanisms like the Credibility Alliance, which are administered by civil society, and they're systemic and meant to be fair, and they're voluntary, and they're self-financing. And it's very important for civil society to be able to do what it wants to do, to have this credibility and transparency seen by everyone. To get real leverage to do the big things that are needed, the planetary level, at the national level, at the local level, are for a better commitment to collaboration among partners of different kinds, to have support systems, what people call ecosystems of among the sector, inside the sector, and basically investments in terms of finance and support, which are critically important. The sector needs finance, like any sector that basically has to make investments in people, in infrastructure, and whatever. And the financial innovations needed are in the area of supporting research, particularly innovation of various types, equity for early finance and risks to the work that arise from the work that they do, and various other kinds of financial engineering. And fourthly, we need much clearer metrics and accounting methods, particularly for the impacts of the work of civil society. This is pretty important because its support can only come by demonstrating really factual impacts. And we need, therefore, to mobilize local initiatives, reliable local collaborators, monitoring systems dedicated to a resilient future. The possibilities of civil society action are many. I can, in the 2 or 3 minutes I have, I think that's what I have, give you very quick examples. A young woman in an NGO in Delhi decided one day that she'd had enough of government urban habitat policy and felt that we really needed a rural habitat policy. Given the fact that more than half the people of our country live in rural areas, it was a major gap, in her opinion, that there wasn't a holistic understanding of how rural communities can satisfy the people who live there and their well-being. And what she did was quite remarkable. You know, for a 25-year-old, she went out there. She wrote up a draft policy that would include all the kinds of issues of shelter, of infrastructure, of job creation, of living growing with natural resources that are available locally, and drafted essentially a law on rural habitat, which she then basically mobilized resources for to do a massive public consultation all over the country, in different states, in different geographical locations, but also in different levels of settlements, different sectors, by involving virtually all the kinds of people who would be affected by this. And 18 successive drafts based on these consultations, she was able to attract the attention of the Ministry of Rural Development. Indeed, the minister himself became personally involved in this exercise, and it has essentially become a policy for the government. So it's possible for civil society to do amazing things, even though they are not able necessarily to have the kind of legislative support that is needed. Another individual person redesigned the whole transport system of Delhi. In the early 70s, the chaos that existed in traffic and for the public transport system, which was basically Delhi Transport Corporation buses, it was quite a horrendous time for the normal citizen, and mobility being one of the most important factors determining quality of life, this individual was able basically to convince the governor of Delhi and the DTC to introduce a systems-based approach, in essence, a rapid bus transit system. And literally within 3 months, DTC was carrying 2.2 times as many, nearly 2.5 times as many people, passengers, as it used to before this system was introduced, and without adding a single bus, with virtually no additional capital investment. That was quite a big thing. Now, these are things that you need NGOs for, and the amount of work that has been done by NGOs on frugal technologies that have direct relevance to lives of people in peri-urban areas and in rural areas is done almost entirely by civil society. There's virtually nothing that has come from big business or from government labs that has actually been able to make much of a difference. Indeed, in the area of construction technologies, materials and technologies for low-cost, affordable, locally based shelter construction, my own organization, Development Alternatives, done probably more than all the official labs in India and maybe even overseas in developing new, very effective, low carbon, low cost technologies. So it seems to me that there are many cases to be made for supporting civil society. And the paper that we presented is essentially an action program on the kinds of people who are joined together on the screen today to come together and really help creatures like VANI become major influences of policy relating to our ability to contribute to national development. So thank you, Harsh, for letting me speak for so long. And I hope that the rest of the meeting goes well. And I will have to leave at some point to make my speech downstairs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And as initially I was saying that this conversation will also give some agenda to VANI for future, because we are also in VANI trying to do some sort of a strategic planning for the future. I think your input is very valuable in that. So may I request Vijay Mahajanji, the second author of this article, is also there with us. Vijayji, sir. Welcome, sir. Nice to see you.
Namaste. Namaste. Sorry, I joined a bit late, but I was there when Ashok started. So he's given an excellent overview, value-added overview of the paper that the three of us wrote together during the COVID period. I just want to draw your attention to some of the action points, Harsh and other colleagues, because I think on principles, there is probably relatively little difference of opinion. I mean, all of us agree that civil society is important for, dealing with the triple crisis that we are facing, the social intolerance crisis, the economic inequality crisis, and the environmental crisis. These three together, are in a sense the product of the kushti, the wrestling match that has happened between the state institutions and market institutions in the 20th century. And that kushti basically put civil society out of the arena, and there was no balancing force left. So for the first 50 years of the 20th century, the state institutions kind of dominated, and thereafter market institutions dominated. And in both cases, they pushed back civil society. But as Ashok just mentioned, almost all innovations, at least the ones that serve the masses, have come from civil society. And by innovations, I don't mean just gizmos, not physical products like hand pumps or sulabh shauchalays. I also mean organizational innovations such as self-help groups or cooperatives or human rights assertion groups, all types of innovation. Microcredit is another example of how capital markets have been mobilized to serve the base of the pyramid. There's similarly a lot of work done by civil society to get the benefits of technology, particularly digital technology, to the base of the pyramid. Left on their own, neither the state institutions nor market institutions would serve the maybe 90% of the population. So I think the time has come, and COVID was the perfect reminder of that. I mean, if we honestly look at, irrespective of whether we are in government or in business or in civil society, if we honestly look at how the COVID crisis was handled by society, it was actually by what I call the unorganized civil society. It wasn't even by the people like us who are really the organized civil society. In a sense, some of us also now reflect some of the ills of the institutionalized government and the institutionalized market actors. A lot of the unorganized civil society, neighborhood groups, individuals, activists, unregistered bodies, temporary groupings of all sorts, they were the ones who really, provided a lot of the succor that was needed during COVID. So, so I think the role of people like us is to irrespective of whether the other two actors, namely the state and the market, whether they acknowledge us, recognize us, or do things to actually dig at our roots, we should keep asserting our role as the balancing force between these two. Otherwise, they will destroy not themselves, but also society. In its pursuit of profits, market institutions destroy the environment, destroy human beings, destroy social relations. In pursuit of untrammeled political power, state institutions do the same. We need to just call this out and say, this is not acceptable. And I understand that, our voices will be laughed at, and for a long time, it will be not recognized. But I draw your attention to a very important book, which I would recommend to everybody. It's already several years old, by Professor Dipankar Gupta, the eminent sociologist who used to be at the JNU. It's called Revolution from Above, the role of the citizen elite. And the point he makes, rather poetically, is that, democracy is not a mirror, it's a hammer. So often we believe that the purpose of democracy is to reflect what the people want. But he says that a lot of the people don't really know what they want, and it's the role of the elites to actually lay out in front of them various alternative desirable ways by which society can get organized, but then subject themselves to the political democratic process, and may the best idea win. So eventually the people do decide, but the people don't decide by laying out what the ideals are. And then he goes on to say that democracy has a tendency to move towards dystopia, because democracy is basically demography through elections. So democracy tends to move towards dystopias, and it's very important to keep injecting a bit of utopian ideals in democracy every once in a while, just as a corrective. It's a bit like the idea of a booster dose of vaccination. Otherwise democracy is constantly likely to be, suffering from entropy and disorder. So our role is extremely important, and we need to be conscious of it. And because it is extremely important, we will not get the support or the place that we deserve. And therefore, the two important resources that are necessary to be effective, which is the financial and the human resources. Till such time, state and market institutions give us some of what they have appropriated from society, and we should claim that. And in our paper, we have talked about a mechanism like the Finance Commission mechanism, where a certain portion of the tax revenues should flow to civil society through a formal process. After all, we've given the right to tax to the government, but that does not mean that everything that is taxed is to be kept by the government. Ultimately, taxes belong to all the society members. And if there are others who are doing something for society, we need to but that's a long shot. And till then, we'll have to rely on basically frugal voluntarism. And the advantage of frugal voluntarism is that it automatically also means human resources also come in. So, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've had the privilege of working with hundreds, if not thousands, of individual activists, most of whom do not have any registered society or trust. They all of them are doing really outstanding work. In many cases, I worry for their safety and their lives. They're showing amazing amount of courage and commitment. And they do this with such frugal resources that, it's really quite amazing. So this business of committed, frugal volunteerism is what we need to promote. So those of us who are in organized civil society, I think we should recognize that our way of functioning has become dysfunctional because we have to run organizations. We need ongoing funding. We need FCRA. We need CSR funds. We therefore actually have obligations. We have legal as well as other, obligations that we have to honor. And in the process, the purpose for which we start doing a lot of what we want to do gets sidelined, and a lot of our energy just gets, put into this. So instead of that, if we can reserve even 10% of our resources to support independent social activists, it will go a long way, because it's amazing how even a 10,000 rupee per month fellowship is like Amrit for a small town or district rural area based activist who's working in maybe only 15-20 villages, but they're handling such important issues so courageously, whether it's the issues of women's rights or whether it is environment, whether it was, all the issues that we all deal with. So I would say that till such time as bigger resources come, we, the organized civil society, should spare 10% of our resources to support independent social activists, preferably below 40 years of age, so that they have the lifespan necessary to work for the next 20-30 years. And of course, when we provide that support, we also provide a little bit of organizational and mentoring support and the networks that we have. So all that is additionally helpful. And I assure you that it will greatly enrich our own practice and our own work. And we need not go out of our respective themes. So for example, if an organization is only working with disabled people, it can identify 20, 30 field-based activists who are working with disabled people and just give them fellowships and mentoring. Another organization which is working only on, say, livelihoods should work with similar activists. So you don't have to significantly go outside your boundary. My last point is that we need to, right now the state, and this is nothing to do with who is currently the ruling party. We've seen this when other parties were in power, that the state basically does not like civil society to be in a role beyond that of a subcontractor, or maybe kind of one of the advisors at the table. But it does not like our role as conscience keepers, as seismographs close to the ground, as people who amplify the voices of the poor, as conscience keepers. And least of all, I like to use this phrase, I want all of you to maybe improve on it, but we are the Anganwadis of democracy. And I'm using the word Anganwadi because we are really right now in a very infantile stage, a childhood stage of our democracy. We don't know how to assert our rights. We don't know how to work with each other to even, forget rural areas and so on. We keep talking about in slums. middle class resident welfare associations. If you've ever been a secretary or a president of an RWA, you know how difficult it is even to collect monthly maintenance and to get people to contribute to basic simple things like segregating gila and sukha kuda or to switch off common lights and so forth. But demands are enormous. So we as civil society are the Anganwadis of democracy. If democracy has to survive and thrive in this nation, that is our most important role. But that role does not require us to have FCRA or CSR funding. It requires us to be out on the ground and to work with people who are already doing this out of passion, out of commitment, and to stretch our hands to them. So we need to therefore assert our role through the media. There is enough support in the media, and by media I don't necessarily mean the mainstream media, but there's enough in the social media side, and through cultural groups, through university-based intellectuals, even though universities are themselves under a lot of attack, and also selected corporate sector individuals. I've worked a lot with people both in the financial sector and the other corporate sector. For example, I've been to the World Economic Forum at Davos several times. And this view that we have that anybody who's in the corporate or the financial sector is a devil incarnate is not correct. I mean, I met some of the most sensitive human beings. I was shocked actually the first few times when I sort of closely interacted with them, that I was talking to a Fortune 500 CEO, because, and this is way back 2003 to 2010 is when I used to go. Their deep concern for environment, their deep concern for inequality. And I'm sure Ashok will testify to this, that there are people in the corporate sector, in the government, who are as deeply concerned about these issues as we are. And we need to quietly build a coalition with them, rather than formal collaborations. Because this is the time for, sort of subterranean action rather than, the old style actions that we used to do. But I'm very, very optimistic and confident that things will change. There is a song that is sung often in activist gathering, Dabe पैरों से सवेरा आ रहा है, फिर कथाओं को खंगाला जा रहा है. So I think there is no doubt that dawn will come. It's coming quietly, and we need to contribute. But most importantly, we need to get out of our organizational identities and go back to the original reasons why Ashok or Amod or Pooja, who I can see, why I came into this sector. Forget about our current identities, our organizational responsibilities. This is the time for us to remember why we came into this sector and impart that and support others who come with the same urge today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's really enlightening. We have got message from Mireji that she has to go for another meeting. Can we, Mireji, can you speak first and then you can go? Mireji?
Mike.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I said I'm happy to speak after but I'll have to leave latest by 1. So since it's 12:30, I'm happy to go after Amodji or whoever.
No, please continue. Then we'll have Amodji.
Okay. I'll stay on as long as I want, because I can, because I do want to hear others.
I want to hear too, Mirai.
Yeah.
Having heard
that's
Vinay
more
Acharya and
time.
Prayas, the other day, Vinay came to Prayas and then, I think I don't want to say what all we discussed. But then I want to hear you first. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Well, I'll be quick. I'm not going to give a synopsis of what I wrote. What I wrote, I called Arogya Swaraj. And I thought I would just take out some of the main lessons from our work on organizing grassroots informal women workers to safeguard their own health. And I called it Arogya Swaraj. I thought it was appropriate as we are celebrating 75 years. How can we not recall a lot of the messages of Gandhiji, which have inspired all of us on this call? And I'm delighted to be here with so many of you. And I think Arogya Swaraj as a concept emphasizes people in control, people in the center. In our case, women in the center, self-help. Because, you know, what more is close to us than our own bodies? And as our women sisters at Seva say so eloquently, our bodies are our only assets. And as long as haath pair hila sakte hain, then we can survive. And also because Arogya Swaraj is part of the long journey to self-reliance. We hear a lot on Atmanirbharta, but it begs the question, how can we be Atmanirbhar without basic health security? So no Swaraj without Arogya, no Arogya without Swaraj. The second lesson I think that I've learned all these years from my sisters is the importance of frontline health workers, particularly women frontline health workers. And I think I don't need to tell this group what yeoman service the women frontline workers of this country did during the pandemic, and they continue to do. They're service-oriented, they're inclusive, they're fearless. Their men folks said, "Bahar mat nikalna," but they were out there, even in the pandemic, helping others before themselves and their families. And no wonder then that Gandhiji had tremendous faith in the women of this country, as did late founder Ilaben Bhatt. And I think those basic principles of faith in local people, and in our case, local women, we try to carry on in Seva and certainly in our health work. And I must say, they have not let us down nor disappointed us. The third, so when we speak, and I was listening with interest to so many old friends and colleagues, when we speak about citizen action, it is these simple women of our country also who hold so many lessons for many of us. The third was that women's economic empowerment cannot be achieved without full employment, which is, in our experience, a composite concept of work and income security, food security, and social security. And social security, of course, involves, among other things, healthcare. So health is part of full employment and the journey towards self-reliance, or what we call Dusri Azadi, the second freedom, freedom from poverty, hunger, and vulnerability. We've also learned, as I mentioned, that health is a priority. Women have understood that there cannot be poverty reduction and self-reliance without health. I already told you that they say very simply, my body is my only asset. The fourth point I want to make is that civil society, as many of you have already said, in the health sector too, is the hub of innovation. If I may first speak about our own sort of innovations, so share with one which I mentioned in the article is our health cooperative, Lok Swasthya Seva Cooperative, which embodies the principles of self-help and self-care without letting the government off the hook, by the way. We're not saying that, you know, there should be a rollback of the public in public health. But I think that it's these simple women of our country, urban and rural, from the mohallas and kasbas, who are showing us the way to health security. And one of these is running a chain of low-cost pharmacies outside the public hospitals through their own health cooperative, where they are shareholders, users, managers, and owners of their own membership-based organization. And these pharmacies, they run 24/7, serving the public, which are generally poor people who go to public hospitals. They also run Seva Shakti Kendras, which are basically like information hubs both for informing women about health and nutrition education and young people and others, not just women, but also linking them to the government entitlements and services and in a transparent manner without any kickbacks. The fifth is partnerships. I think we've learned that in health, everything we can't do on our own as women. We need the government. We need people in the private sector who are not exploitative. And especially at the local level, so that there's no duplication. It should be filling in the gaps by civil society, not duplication. Sixth, the importance of primary healthcare. I think this is an innovation that came from civil society. As you all are aware, for much of India's early years of independence, actually right up to 1994, we had more a family planning system than a public health system. And it was civil society across the country which pushed this, including us, comprehensive, and women as key actors, decentralized at the doorstep. So the whole decentralized approach, people's involvement. Seventh, women point out the neglected aspects of primary healthcare, like occupational health and mental health, which has come up a lot during the pandemic. The other thing we've learned about this grassroots approach to health is that it promotes solidarity and organizing. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that health is so basic to all communities that it sort of joins people of all communities, castes, religious minorities, and others together, and in their own membership-based organizations like the Health Cooperative I mentioned. Knits communities together, and of course, Sarva Dharam is one of the main pillars of Gandhiji's philosophy. Then we have found it's empowering for women. I have mentioned stories of Chanchi Ben and Aisha Ben, Husna Ben, and Sharda. These are informal workers whose lives became transformed. Knowledge is power is a truism, but once they had the knowledge of health and their own bodies, their lives changed, their families' lives changed, their status in the family and the community changed. Many of them were asked, like Chanchi Ben, who's disabled, Dalit, and rural woman, landless, how much more vulnerable can you be? She was asked by the community to stand for election as Sarpanch. So these are some of the important changes that we see. But of course, we need end-to-end, from primary healthcare right up to tertiary. So you need the health cooperative, but you also need the insurance cooperative, which we were able to register. Another important point that we keep hammering with the government, which has emerged from civil society work, is health can be a form of livelihood. Why should Ashas and Anganwadi workers be all honorary? This can be an important service to their communities. Then the integrated approach. And then, as Gandhiji reminded us in Hind Swaraj, which I've referred to in my piece, we have to reduce our dependency on doctors and also on technology, I'm afraid. We all know about all the way technology in the health sector has been misused. I don't want to waste time on that. So just to kind of finish up, I just want to mention that our experience and that of other civils, which dovetails with other civil society colleagues and friends, is that actually the health sector has provided some of the oldest voluntary efforts. I'm thinking of Medical Friends Circle, which inspired me as a young public health worker, and so many charitable trusts across the country doing health work when no one else would dare to do it or bother. Innovations I've already mentioned. I think the whole idea of community health workers and ASHAs came from the comprehensive health work of Jamkhed, of Mandwa. I remember Dr. Noshir Antia at this time. Many of you would know him. So these ideas came from there. The whole idea of neonatal care came from our colleagues at SEARCH. I also want to mention partnerships. I think that it's not been an easy road, never is. But for those of us who've been working on public health, Cairo was a watershed. We were always arguing and in some ways fighting with our government about the family planning approach. But we came together in Cairo, and that was a major shift in the way thinking happened on public health and women's health. And then that led to one thing leads to another, National Health Mission, and so on. I think a lot of the policy shifts in the health sector, we can say with utmost modesty has actually come from civil society, been pushing and pushing and showing, leading by example. And finally, I just want to end with a few questions which come to my mind as not only in health, but in all our work. One is how to retain the kind of spirit that all of us see in the voluntary sector while growing and scaling. We don't want to become these monoliths. We want to become remain close to the ground. How in our health sector, particularly, how to retain quality as we scale up, how to retain that innovative spirit, despite all the odds, how to, develop human and financial resources so that we have some level of Atmanirbharta, and then how to retain the public in public health when we see this onslaught of the private sector, some of our best doctors being picked off and taken into corporate hospitals. And finally, as the government has agreed on universal healthcare, it's there in all our documents, whatever the government of the day, what and how can we involve people so that it's not just simply one more top-down thing, delivering healthcare, which cannot be delivered in that sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miraiji. Very precise presentation. Before I move to Amoji, I would like to also request that, if we take 5 minutes each, because we have so many senior people and we would like to hear from everyone before they disappear from the screen. So we'll try to include everyone. So Amoji, please, sir, your chance.
All right. No. In fact, it was really good that I've been listening to Vijay Bhai, Ashok Bhai, and Mirai, and of course, Sanjay also. That was very interesting, and that really adds to my ideas. First of all, the article on this protecting and nurturing childhood in India, which I have sent it, and which I presume is getting published or something. Now today it appears to me, and in between the time when I wrote it and now when it's getting published, a couple of new ideas, not new ideas, some very important issues which really crop up. I think if you permit me, I'll partly add them somewhere. If it is getting printed now, I have no idea. Is it printed already, Harsh, or it is going to be printed? Hello, Harsh?
It's printed online,
Yes.
right?
All right, it doesn't matter.
It's not going to be physically printed.
Okay,
So
online, correct.
we
So
can do it.
now 2-3 important things which are very important, which I think one should understand. See, we haven't really defined, at least I have not very clearly defined the childhood itself, in the sense that who is a child and what is childhood and what is our coverage. Because it is becoming a subject matter of huge discussion all over. It has been there because different laws and different policies and different programs, they define child in different ways. And that is something which is not really good for the sector and our work, because we take it for granted that the child is up to 18 years of age. And this 18 years should remain a constant factor. For the simple reason that a person ceases to be a child after 18 years, becomes an adult. And as an adult, a person has many, many advantages. In fact, most of the fundamental rights a person acquires while a person becomes adult. Right to drive, right to marry, right to vote, and variety of other rights and privileges which adult acquires after 18 years of age. And the child is deprived of them. The child doesn't really have those kind of rights. So that's something which is very, very important. Secondly, it appears to me that the entire concept of juvenile justice, the term is misleading. I have been telling it earlier also and repeating it, that the term juvenile justice is loaded with terrible negativity, because the term juvenile is there. Actually, this term is a borrowed expression. In India, we don't have this term at all. I have written that part, that the child is balak, balika, kishore, kishori, and that kind of expression is there. Juvenile is an out and out negative terminology. We did it for the simple reason, when you go back into the history, you find that in 1860, there's something called Apprenticeship Act that for the first time defined the child. And then a child who was, let's say, an offender, was not only brought to book, but was allowed to be something else, maybe towards reformative process, get skilling and all that stuff. And then the child was separated from the adult. 1860, I'm talking, 1860, 1850, in fact. That is prior to the criminal justice system coming into existence after the first war of independence, which I talk about 1860, Indian Penal Code, Indian Police Act, and variety of things which came up after 1860. It precedes the creation of the criminal justice system. So the juvenile justice system or the child protection system had started germinating and growing even before the criminal justice system came. And subsequently, what happened, that Reformatory Act that came in 1880s. And after that, as you go further down, you find that 1820s, we had Children's Act in various states, because even those times, the child happened to be the state subject. There was no national law concerning the child. Finally, all these state laws, they got converged, and then we had something called 1960, we had Children's Act. Children's Act did not serve the purpose. I mean, it was a very inadequate law. It did not cover majority of features which the child requires in the normal routine of anything happening. So 1986, we had the first ever national law and Juvenile Justice Act 1986. And this term juvenile was deliberately used because we could not have created a national law without this term being there. So that is something which is very important. And 2000, this law became Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2000. And from 2000 to 2021, the latest amendments, which brings about a lot of negative changes in it, to 2021, this legal process has developed. And, you know, as chance would have it, that, well, as a police officer, maybe in way back in 1980s, well, no, couple of things happened. In fact, I think Vijay Bhai was referring that why people like us have come to this sector and how we became so serious about it. I mean, it's nearly 34 years back that I started Prayas, and 34 years I worked in police. Nearly 20 years, you know, being common to police and Prayas. I mean, and my understanding or participation in the voluntary sector during these 20 years. So this is what it is there. See what happened that, you know, as DCP Crime and Railways of Delhi, one night I found nearly 15 children locked up in the lockup of the New Delhi railway station. They were packed like sardines, and I was aghast to see that situation. And that was the time, you know, I was also saddled with certain kind of responsibilities where the children who were found by the voluntary organizations, found by the police in various parts of the city, and they had to be looked after, they had to be maintained. So these kind of street children, homeless children, and children committing small kind of, not crimes, I would say, acts of deviance, these kind of children were coming on our lap, and we had to do something about them. So these are the things. Then there was a big fire in Jahangirpuri, and a lot of children became homeless. So these combinations, they coincided with creation of several organizations. I recall that when in railways, I found those children, by chance, Salam Balak Trust had already was there. It was almost the same time that Butterfly, Salam Balak Trust, Delhi Council for Child Welfare, and Prayas, they were all growing together. They all started together. So a new kind of activities started by the voluntary organizations, other than the orphanages, you know, the kind of anathalaya or orphanage, उस टाइप का जो कल्चर था, वो कल्चर में एक फर्क आया. There was a change towards juvenile justice. Now, let me tell you, friends, that it is very much required to understand that the entire system, care, protection, development, welfare, rehabilitation, social reintegration of children, these are the ideas, you know, on which child protection has to develop. And these are the themes on which, you know, the universally accepted UNCRC also operates. So there, I see certain kind of connectivity between the juvenile justice system and the child rights. See, the child rights, as I mentioned, are very distinct compared to the rights of the adults. The fundamental rights are something different. I mean, the fundamental rights were always justiciable after our constitution. If a person, adult's fundamental right is violated, person has a right to go to High Court or Supreme Court to get the relief out of it. But so far as children are concerned, their rights, you know, the right to survival, right to development, right to protection, right to participation, which further flower into about 54 rights within UNCRC. Those rights and their fulfillment actually is not covered within fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are very basic, and it is meant more for the adult world. So there, when you look at the development of the legal process in India, I mean, the fulfillment of the basic needs of the child and the fulfillment of the basic rights of the child, this is what we call juvenile justice system or child protection system. There is a need to fulfill them, these rights and needs. And these fulfillments don't really come through the courts only. These fulfillment have to come from voluntary organizations primarily. And that is why today I was asking my colleague sitting here as to out of 9,500 shelters and homes being run in India, which accommodate about less than 3 lakh children, what percentage is being run by the voluntary organizations? You'll be happy to know that nearly 90% of them are being run by us. And as you know that in the entire process, there is a big kind of, I would not call it turf war, but some kind of conflict always going on between, let's say, institutional care versus non-institutional care. I never participated in that kind of conflict because I always found that institutional care is a necessity. I mean, these homes and shelters are required for those kind of children who have no homes to go back, who have no place to live. I mean, they're deprived of family care. And since they are not able to take advantage of their family support, there is no option but to keep these children in some kind of homes and shelters. They may be good, bad, or indifferent, but they happen to be there. So this is, institutional care becomes the first resort and not the last resort so far as these kind of children are concerned. And let me tell you one thing more, which is very important today, that there are nearly 20 million children who, according to our conservative estimate, happen to be the children without family support in India. And we have just about 2.65 lakh children who can be accommodated in 9,000 odd homes in the country, meaning thereby that less than 1.5% of the children who are at the point of extinction, if they are not looked after, they happen to be accommodated in the various facilities run by the government and voluntary organizations. So it's a very different ballgame in the sense that when you talk about the child protection, juvenile justice, child rights, these are the kind of areas where we are supposed to operate. The child rights, for example, the child rights was not defined in the domestic law, despite UNCRC commitment. It is only when in 2005, the Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act came into existence. And since I happened to be the first chairman of Delhi Commission for Child Rights, I had an opportunity to implement this law. This law, CPCR Act, for the first time defined what is child rights and gave the child rights the kind of authority of law so that the rights could be claimed as reality and not just heard about. So this is something which is very, very important, I would like to say. Now, today, a couple of big disputes are going on. I mean, between the voluntary organizations or the child rights activists and all those who are engaged. And a very, very good number of us, I think a large number of voluntary organizations and social activists and social workers, they are engaged in working for children. And our point of view or our stand on the issues relating to children is very different compared to the stand being taken by the government, for example. Recently, I'll just give you an example. I was virtually participating in the discussion while this Durban conference took place on child labor, recently, just a couple of months back, organized by ILO and organized by UNICEF. I wanted to know that how it is that in past 3-4 years, the number of child labor globally speaking has taken a quantum leap. There's a big jump. Nearly 10 million new children got added as child labor globally speaking. So I wanted to know from the government of India, the representative participating there, as to what is the percentage of Indian child labor. Because the global population being 7.5 billion, India's population being 1.3 billion, and the sustainable development goals, our position being 132 out of 191, human development indicators, we being far behind many others. I mean, what is the number of child labor in the country? Because after 2011 census, there is no official record. But unofficially, or different types of other reports which come from the government, that generally indicate that number of children who happen to be children in need of care and protection, child labor, or the homeless children or destitute children, or children in various types of crisis and deprivations is not less than 30-35 million. And then kind of proportionately, if you find out, you'll understand that the same number comes when we talk about 160 million child labor across the globe, and India's not estimated number of child labor could be about 30-35 million. So we have to work. I mean, there is a difference, friends. I think the difference is that the voluntary organizations working for children have a very direct role to play. I mean, they have to really perform in terms of services. Direct services have to be given, because it is not enough that we use child rights in our campaigns only. It is not enough that we take the child and ask him to speak something, and he speaks and she speaks, and we hear the sob stories and we are happy with that. In fact, we are extremely unhappy with that. The children need to be looked after. The children need to be supported by the adult world. So the role of voluntary organizations, the role of civil society organizations, let's say as social workers, as counselors, as institution makers, and non-institutional programs, like in things, for example, aftercare program or sponsorship program or foster care program or adoption programs, variety of these programs which are there. There, our role is very direct, very, very distinct, and we are supposed to render services. Maybe not in case of other types of social work organizations and bodies. Such direct services may not be required as much as it is required in respect of the children. So this is something, which I thought I must emphasize, that our justification lies in direct services. And as an organization, as you know, Prayas in past 34 years, today, for example, we have got nearly 700 full-time workers. I mean, they have got to be there because we are running 38 homes. We are running programs for education, vocational training, and health programs, like Mirai was talking about. There, I have to say, like in Arunachal Pradesh, we decided to work for children and then decided to work for the health program. There are about 6-7 primary health centers, sub-centers that we are running. We find we are doing very well. I think the performance of voluntary organizations in the health sector is also equally good. But then our participation as against the private sector, the privatized health programs, I think we can't compete with them. In fact, we should be participating in these kind of programs. So friends, I think in respect of the area I'm talking about, that is nurturing and protecting the children and childhood, we should very strongly emphasize upon the direct and service-oriented role of the voluntary organizations. That's what we are trying to do. I mean, a lot of people who are participating in our VANI activities who happen to be from the children's sector. And then we need to do that. And this is very, very important. One last point I would like to mention, which is again very important for us, that when we talk about, like I think Ashok Bhai was talking about, that these three sectors, when we talk about government and talk about market economy, and we talk about voluntary organizations. See, voluntary sector or civil society organizations are as much democratic processes, perhaps far more potent, far more important, far more active democratic processes, as perhaps the democratic institutions created, let's say, from election to election. The performance of MLAs and MPs are decidedly not being judged with regard to their contributions in the context of socio-economic changes or the contributions they make. What they do in the social sector, for example, children, women, disabled, elderly, health, education, environment, poverty alleviation. In these social sectors, the contribution being made by, let's say, elected representatives is not really being considered. But in these social sectors, our role is very important. In fact, there is certain kind of interchangeability between the voluntary sector and the social sector. We cross each other like this and we work together. We work in tandem all the time. So our role, as I understand, that as activists also, our role does not diminish when we have to create services for the children particularly and for the youth. We should be getting into those areas. Skill development, for example, I'm just making a point because Prayas runs about nearly 15-20,000 youth from marginalized background. They are always with us for various training programs. There's something called Jan Shikshan Sansthan. I refer to it because there are 300 Jan Shikshan Sansthans today across the country, 300 districts. And each one of them is being run by a voluntary organization. Whereas most of the programs in the skilling ecosystem, where the education has become integrated part of it, is being run by the industries, private sector. They have gone to private sector. Jan Shikshan Sansthan perhaps is the only organization which has been recognized and brought within the skilling ecosystem. And nearly 7 to 8 lakh youth are being trained by the voluntary organizations. Prayas being one of them, running 5 Jan Shikshan Sanstans in 5 districts of India, like from Andamans to, let's say, Bihar and other places. We are running these Jan Shikshan Sanstans. So we must find our space. We must find our space and get into those areas where we have the opportunity to give direct services. And there we can compete with, let's say, the private sector, the private sectors, and we must take the fullest advantage of government's schemes and programs and support. So this is perhaps a different kind of role I am talking about. Children and youth particularly, this role is very, very important. So the point I'm trying to make that we have to present the voluntary sector in different kind of situations where we are justified. I mean, there's no scope for, let us say, those people who are critiques of the voluntary organizations' activities. Even they can't say that, yes, you are doing something which is not proper or appropriate. If we fight with the government, if we fight with the policies or on the political platform, we make our voice clear, perhaps there is a scope for discussions, debates, and criticism also, and we can come the harm's way. But when it comes to render services, direct services to deprive poor and those kind of people with whom we work today, I think there's not much of a scope for the government also to be very critical about it. So I would like to limit myself or limit an organization like Prayas and many children's organizations to the direct services so that we are able to create a space for ourselves. But then again, the problem is that government feels very uncomfortable now, even when the voluntary organizations are working for things like hunger. I mean, you know very well that Save the Children got this kind of very absurd kind of report or communication went all over that they were collecting funds for hungry children. What's wrong in that? I mean, and we have no option but to present the various reports in right perspective. I mean, the hunger index, the global hunger index is primarily about children. It's mostly about children. Let's say we cannot think about, there can be different opinion and somebody could say that global hunger index is not an appropriate indication of conditions in India. But wherever it concerns children and whatever, it's a report coming from very authentic sources and you can't just wish it away. And one last point I would like to refer to would be in the context of SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a common concern. The government also has to be equally serious about it, perhaps far more serious. Because in Niti Aayog, I had the opportunity to participate along with other NGO friends in formulating certain kind of documents for the Prime Minister. Actually, it was under Niti Aayog. The Prime Minister of India, he wanted Niti Aayog to prepare a document that was coinciding with SDG. It was called kind of vision document for 15 years, 2015 to 30, strategy paper for 7 years, an action plan for 3 years, where we participated. And there we find that SDG is something which cannot be wished away. SDG is something which is entirely common for us, very important for voluntary organizations, as it is important for the government. For instance, these days we are participating in SDG platform 8.7 along with ILO. Government is supposed to join, but they are uncomfortable when it comes to finding out as to how much we have achieved in the SDG goals. I mean, what's happening to targets, because the results are very uncomfortable. So there are situations where whenever we speak, whenever we talk about our lagging behind or being the deficiencies in the whole process, there may be discomfort, there may be kind of criticism also, or perhaps we may come the harm's way. But by and large, services will not create a problem, but our pointing out of these things may create problem, but then we have to do it. We have no option today but to point out. I mean, these are certain points I thought I'll speak. The document is there. I'll make some changes, Harsh, if you permit me, minor changes. And of course, thank you very much. Listening to, I think, the previous speakers was real knowledge for me. And I would like to continue to hear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amoji. Thank you. Actually, we have a limitation of time, so I will request every speaker to limit to their 5-minute presentation. So may I now request Pooja ji to continue the conversation of children.
Thank you. So, actually, at the time I was writing this article, it struck me that something you said, Vijay, also struck me that, the role of the sector and what we do. Yeah. There are facets of it which create comfort, and there are facets of it that create discomfort. In the powers that be, whether those powers are, today or yesterday or were a different dispensation or whatever, different parts seem to be handled well or not handled well. So the role that all of us play during during a disaster, which is the role about plugging the gaps that get created or the holes in the safety net that the constitution is supposed to provide, right? Which could be disaster relief. It could be, for example, this particular article I've written about the really distressing loss of access to education for what is perhaps today the largest school closures in the world, right? And I think all of you here are more than able and know as much or more than me about the role that education should play in the creation and construction of this nation, right? But that is one of the roles that only one of the roles that we play, because it is in identifying those gaps and then maybe creating models to plug them or not, as Amod was talking so passionately about. That is one part of the role where, at least at CRY, we have reached a conclusion that it is not possible for civil society to do it at the scale that it is required, right? I can do, I at CRY, I'm saying, maybe at CRY, I can do 2 lakh children in hunger. Maybe somebody else can do another, whatever. But to get an organized response, it is the very system that will have to be plugged, right? The ICDS system will have to work. The nutrition rehabilitation system will have to work. So whatever we do, we will not be able to, we cannot and we should not give up or abdicate our role of being able to point out what those gaps are, right? And that can happen in 2 ways. And as I see us going forward, yes, there is a benign way of doing it, which is because you are doing the work, you are able to talk about the gaps and the requirements, which is something that, if I look back at 70 years of civil society, we have done, right? Like Mirai talked about in health. I've seen in education with CRY, right? We looked at creating the whole concept of teacher training, or creating educational resources for children, but it also had to include being able to fight for a fundamental right to education, right? Because that was the culmination. We can work on the models, whether it is for saying, okay, you add language teachers, etc. But these models have to be towards scale, and true scale can only come through policy change. Now, as we go forward, how do we play these roles, right? What I find is, unfortunately, at this point, is that if we do, for example, real data analysis, yeah, and say, here are the gaps, that itself is an uncomfortable process, because if the data analysis will point out that our own national data is reflecting, for example, child hunger, or child not in protection, or children in labor, the hugely shocking and continually shocking number of underage children being married, right? And on the other hand, not to mince any words, while we are going, we're signed on to SDGs, we are signed on to lots of UN conventions. our laws are actually rolling a little bit backwards. For example, what was a Child Labor Regulation Act up to 18 is today now both, it was an abolition act. It is now both an abolition and gentle word regulation, which means it's okay from now on to have 14 to 18 age group in labor. But yeah, I mean, it should not be hazardous. You know what I mean. So I think a lot of thinking at this time about how do we continue the work and do it in the frugal resources that we have. How do we support local level community activists? And yes, do we have to be less hysterical? Yes, maybe so. But utilize every, I think, space that we do get. I always like to tell the story that actually my colleague who unfortunately we lost during COVID, Asim, from Chhattisgarh said, he said that the rumor about CRY was that if you had to join CRY and you asked for a pencil, they told you to go and to the nearest stationery shop and get it for free. And that is, I think, the spirit in which we have to work. Yeah. Rather than be driven by what I've seen happen is that, the grantors say, "Arey, ye to aapko paisa kharcha karna hi hai, otherwise I will withdraw it." Right? So you are actually not utilizing your resources properly. So I think some of those is something that we cannot and should not shy away from, right? The fact that all our work has to be focused towards influencing policy. Yeah. And yeah, I can talk endlessly about the downsides of our sector, right? And all of us are very good at doing it. But I have recently come to the conclusion that I'm not going to do it anymore, right? We can talk about nepotism, how people are not building second lines and therefore institutions are withering. We can talk about how we don't get along with each other. Each of us is very happy to get our own little invitation and not bring others in, etc., etc. And those are downsides, but this is not the moment to self-bash. I think this is the moment to say we have to survive. Yes, those of us in organized civil society also have to learn to deal with regulations, authorities, and therefore, what is the role that we can play? And I've thought long and hard about this for CRY. And it struck me that the role that we play is what we play for our partners, is train people to comply better, get people to arm themselves with reliable data in order to make their points, not tell fairy stories, even if the market tells us to. Yeah, but actually be able to do our work better, do the plugging of gaps, do the identifying of gaps, and presenting the models. Yeah, we may find, and we have found, that there is tremendous receptivity at your district level, at even up to your state level, and maybe that is what we need to focus on. So that's all I want to say. I don't want to take more than my 5 minutes, and I actually feel that as we go forward, that is what we have to do, rather than sit and beat our breasts and say hamara foreign money chala gaya, hamara yes wo gaya. Now what do we have to do? How do we empower ourselves to move forward? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pooja ji.
Over to you, Harsh.
Thank you. Very nice. You rightly said, it's not time for self-bashing. Itni zyada hum log kar lete hain, sometimes we all start going to depression also. I think the best
we are
time
very
is,
good at it. Yeah, we are great self-critiquers, hai na?
yes. But I think it's now also time to celebrate what the sector has done in the last 75 years, in spite of all the odds, what we have done. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, look at education today. For example, I'm just taking where CRY has been an actor, right? We have moved from a place where We didn't have teacher training. We didn't have special resources. We didn't have a right to education. Yes, is it perfect? No. Did we get it up to 18? No. But the fact is that our 330 million children have a right in writing, right? And it can be activated. We have midday meal schemes, and we have to focus on activating those resources and making that government money work.
Thank you. Can we continue the conversation and invite Minu Madera ji in the sequence? And she's work on gender and women empowerment, or especially their work on male-dominant occupations. Minu ji, please.
Thank you, Harsh. I shall also try and keep into the 5 minutes and just focus on some of the key messages that I hope the article that I've contributed to is also making. So really, the article is about women's empowerment by facilitating their entry into male-dominated occupations. And we have defined it as what we call non-traditional livelihoods for a reason. The reason being that most of the work around livelihoods and around women in work, where we have enabled women to gain employment, raise some more monies, provide better livelihoods, has tended to be around gendered, roles that women occupy. And if we do an analysis of the market, we see that remunerative incomes, these roles do not provide remunerative incomes, and they are a little bit more money, and they add so much more to the women's work as well, women's work which includes a lot of unpaid care work, etc. And so one of the key learnings that we have had, and if we look at the work in the entire civil society sector around it, is that women's empowerment actually cannot be addressed without addressing issues of gender-based violence. And I say that because most of the work, which if it focuses purely around technocratic solutions, then it misses the whole point that when we look at women's empowerment, the problems are really rooted within the gendered social and cultural norms. And unless those norms are visibilized and talked about, and actually, in fact, even the work with children, now that I'm listening to that and reflecting about it, somehow we have talked a lot about the state and the market, but one of the social institutions that we have not talked about enough is the institution of family. And data shows that families, 90% of the violence against women happens within families or within the communities that they consider to be safe, quote unquote. And unless this myth around families being very safe spaces for actually women, children, elderly, all the vulnerable populations that we are, disabled people, all the populations that we are talking about, it needs to be challenged, and it needs to be broken. There are, of course, huge challenges when we come to the whole issue of how decent work is structured. I think some of the speakers earlier have also talked about that, that when we are talking about work, we must, I think Mirai spoke about it, we must talk about decent work in a holistic concept. But we know that markets have always been unequal, and increasingly with liberalization and gig economy, they are not helpful to anyone, any of the vulnerable groups that we talk about, but especially so for the women, for whom the challenges get exacerbated. However, the solution does not, according to me, lie in disengagement, but rather engaging to disrupt. And again, I'll refer to some of the earlier speakers who have talked about making alliances, and we will need to make alliances, not just with the markets, with the corporates, but also with the unions, with those other formations who are fighting for the rights of women workers and other workers as well. If I talk about the government, I mean, I think, there has been a tremendous amount of work that the women's movement has contributed in terms of the policy engagement and making sure that some of the most cutting edge issues have been addressed in terms of laws, policies, etc. But when it comes to the delivery of these policies, that is where the huge challenge is, and the devil kind of always lies in the detail. To take a very small example, recently the Delhi Transport Corporation opened its doors for women drivers, and it has taken years of advocacy because they have had the recruitment criteria itself was just singularly positioned only for men, and they didn't have any differentiated recruitment criteria for women drivers. So when we get to even talking about engaging with the government, the need to engage into details and to overcome those invisible barriers which do not allow women entry into what we call the more male dominated occupations has to be looked at. And to be able to, only when we are able to look at all these three aspects will we be able to ensure that women have access to these kind of trainings. Because when we talk about reaching to the last person, that last person is really somebody who is locked into the false domain of private sphere, where many a times even information does not reach. And we all know about the digital divide. We all know about these, how the inequalities in the society have only increased. And even for a young woman, Dalit woman, woman from trans community living in a place, even in a national capital, getting access to mobile phone, having control over her own mobility, being able to decide when she will be able to leave home and come back home, and not experience violence or of any kind on the roads, is a huge challenge. And we are talking about a whole country here which is hugely deficit in what we can call a gender sensitive social infrastructure. So in the absence, and what I mean by that is really making sure simply like having roads and streets which are well lit, having creches which run full time, having working women hostels in all over the country, having safe shelter spaces, etc. Given the deficit of this kind of infrastructure, it then falls upon the civil society to come up with to subsidize the state and the market in many ways, when even as we demonstrate innovative ways to address to demonstrate pathways to empowerment for women or for any vulnerable community. And I keep saying that. The reason I believe that we do need to now look at the non-traditional livelihood is it's kind of reflective of the whole debate around STEM subjects in the education sphere. We are very familiar with the fact that less number of girls go in for STEM subjects and so on and so forth. The same debate reflects itself in the workspace also. I mean, of course, there are many vertical and horizontal segregations. There's the issue of unequal wages and pay gaps and unsafe workspaces. But the fact remains that for the poor, marginalized women from across intersectionalities of caste, race, class, gender, ability, etc., sexuality, access to livelihood options which provide remunerative incomes remains a big challenge. And one of the big challenges, again, which is not talked about, which is true across, is really the burden of unpaid care work. It applies to everybody across. And once again, why the family needs to come into our focus, because unpaid care work is one of the most important reasons why we see women, even those who have gone through the education system, not being able to access work or sustain work, and for women to not just be earning a few little more money, but to be able to make remunerative monies and be able to voice and be able to negotiate unpaid care work at home what is indisputable is that women's economic empowerment has to go hand in hand with social empowerment, with personal empowerment, and other aspects of it. We know that simply earning more money does not make women more empowered. And years of history around, our work on dowry, our work on domestic violence has taught us that we do need to have the economic empowerment go hand in hand with social empowerment of women. And which is why the whole work around, what is called skills plus plus. So there is a lot of work happening around skills, and there is a whole national skill development mission, but it is hugely focused primarily on imparting of skills. Our understanding is that women, marginalized people, young people, they don't have skills, not because they are not interested, but because there are structural constraints. There are the way we are structured. There are fundamental barriers which stop them from accessing these skills. So unless our trainings also include an element of awareness, of rights, of conscientization, of all of that, it will not enable women. And we know the data. We know that India is one of the few countries where women's participation in labor force has been coming down over the years. And majority of the women who are in the labor force continue to be in the informal sector. There is a lot which is stated and which says that if women were to join the workforce, the GDP of the country will grow so much, but it will not happen unless we are able to provide, unless we are able to address these basic bottlenecks, the issues around violence in family, outside, issues around unpaid care work, and in empowering women to be able to address these barriers themselves, so they are able to renegotiate these barriers which continue to hold them back. And therefore, the false dichotomy between the private and the public as well needs to be broken down to ensure that only if public spaces are safe will women venture into public spaces. And that itself will also enable them to make private spaces more safe. And, that would be some of the key points that I think the article tries to address through the couple of case stories and through the work of a lot of other civil society organizations in the sector. As I was going through this, Harsh, I would also like to just make one point that I think one of the big areas of work that we have not focused on is around women and sexuality, and the entire and a whole lot of work which has been done over the last 75 years in, particularly by the LGBTQI communities. And it would be great if we can add a chapter around that as well. Thank you very much. And I hope I haven't exceeded my time limit.
Thank you, Meenaji. Thank you. And just to take the conversation ahead, may I now request Vandana Shivaji to talk about her work. Everyone know her. She doesn't require any introduction because all of us have heard so much about her. So Vandana ji, please can share your experience. Thank you. Let's mute. Vandana ji, you are mute.
Yeah, thank you so much. I, like Ashok, should have been in Bangladesh, but I had a fall and have torn my ligaments and all, so I canceled that trip. My contribution to the book is the work of Beat Swaraj. What could be more important in this celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav? I was thrown into this area of work because I was invited to a meeting in 1987 where the chemical corporations were talking about how 5 of them would own and control the seed, and they do it through genetic engineering and through having laws put through GATT, which became WTO, the intellectual property laws. So I had to start from scratch to find ways to save our seed sovereignty. And of course, I got a lot of inspiration from Gandhi. The spinning wheel was my inspiration. We've created 150 community seed banks. Any farmer who saved their own seed is not in debt. There are no farmer suicides. Wherever there's dependence on markets and seeds, there is the 400,000 suicides of farmers in India. I think Navdania's work has, in a way, created the contemporary discourse on intellectual property, on biodiversity, biopiracy. We have fought cases of biopiracy about which I've talked. And most importantly, we prevented the redefinition of seed as a machine invented by the Monsantos of the world. I worked with Parliament, and we have in our law, Article 3J and 3D. 3D is on the medicine side. 3J says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions, therefore not patentable. And this year, when Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which has been our inspiration, will be the big theme for the G20, I think it'll be very important for VANI to bring the contributions. I don't like to differentiate between civil and uncivil society. We are society, full stop. There's corporations, there's governments, and then there's society. And we as society have to defend the freedoms that have been defended and practiced over centuries, that are defended by our independence movement. That time it was around cotton. Now it's about the food we eat. It's the seeds that farmers grow. And when I started, I knew there would be a lot of harm. I'd studied the Green Revolution and seen how prosperous Punjab was destroyed. But I could not have imagined that farmers will commit suicide. So I invite all of you to take on them. So many of you work on child hunger. That too is connected to the seeds we grow and the agriculture we practice and the agricultural models we have. So it's a new moment, and I know all the corporations are trying very hard to silence the voice of society because they want to be the only voice across the board, echoed by governments. And this is the moment where Azadi has to be defended by each of us in every sphere. And I want to congratulate VANI for taking this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandana-ji. Actually, we have also requested Rajesh Bhai, he's the third author of that article, which was written by Vijay Mahajan and Ashok Khosla. So, but I also requested him to give a overall concluding statement in that. So we'll say Jayanji and then Rajesh Bhai. Jayanji, please.
Thank you very much, Harsh. And first of all, when you are slightly down in the list of speakers, you see that most of the points have been already covered very well. So I will specially refer to the points made by Dr. Ashok Khosla and Vijay, because together they gave a very, very good analysis of the whole contribution of the sector, as well as also the challenges which we face currently now. So that was wonderful. And then we heard from various other colleagues, very good sector-specific actions taken and the work which is going on. So that gives us a lot of hope, and it gives us a lot of hope that we will continue with this struggle which we are currently facing. I would agree with the Pooja not to do self-bashing and would not go into that yet, but to just to remind that currently the situation is not very conducive. And while some kind of an organization can still do the work with ease, some kind of organizations engaged in some kind of activities have various challenges at the moment. So the whole challenge is that how do you sustain? I mean, as I think Vijay was saying, that the civil society is the third pillar of democracy, state, market, and civil society. And the civil society has to have a watch on state and the market. But unfortunately, civil society is gradually getting out of the system, and the domination is between the market and the state together. So how do we reclaim that space is something very, very important, and I think we need to work towards that end. I think some of the I will just some of the analysis in the we have completed 75 years, and this is our jubilee year. So we have been discussing about how do we structure our work for the future and what are the immediate challenges. So collaboration and partnership emerges as one of the very important areas, but one has to also remember that there are different frameworks in the civil society in India. So the different frameworks have to be recognized, and the strengths and weaknesses of the framework have to be, and then the synergic effort should be built upon. That synergy is very, very important in today's context. The another important thing which we realize that there has to be a diversion as far as resource is concerned, because we have traditionally been dependent on one kind of resources, and that resources are not only being threatened but also becoming a hindrance in the use of transformative development work. So that how do you localize resources? So many organizations are trying local resource mobilization. CRY, I know, is a wonderful example of it. But how do we translate that at the grassroots level, at the localization level? So a lot of localization is necessary to be brought in at the grassroots level. And when we talk of localization, then we talk of local institutions, social movements, mass organizations, people's organizations. How do you build them up and enable them to manage their own affairs, the leadership, the governance aspect of it, as well as also the local resource mobilization. We are currently working with about 225-30 Jan Sangatans, in Hindi we call them. And in all the Jan Sangatans, we are now trying to build up these institutions of the community and to localize resource mobilization, to build up local leadership so that they can at least fight for the rights and justice, not only the entitlement or economic development, but also the rights and human rights issues. How can they manage at that local level so that you have multiple organizations of such nature at different key areas in different parts of the country. So that's one. And along with that, we are practicing an ecosystem approach. I mean, within the given geographical limit, in addition to supporting Jan Sangatans, we are building an ecosystem approach where other smaller voluntary organizations and other specialized institutions are also part of that ecosystem so that they can provide. Like we talked about the fellowship here. Fellowship, we are very serious. We are providing, but we are very seriously considering doing it, because a lot of activists, the work, I mean, with a small help, a huge amount of commitment, with huge amount of commitment and passion, a lot of good and strong rights-based work is being done. So that support also has to be continued and broadened. So that is what we are trying. So identifying all the stakeholders in a given micro or macro ecosystem and linking them with the people's organization so that this they continue, even if the registrations are challenged or negated, or there are complexities in compliances and all. How do you overcome? And in this factor, we have realized that informal has got more advantage than the formal structure. The larger, smaller processes have got more advantage than the larger institutions like CASA and maybe others. So there are limitations coming in, and we have to find new ways of working together. So I would appreciate, and it's been a very good learning experience with all of you, and very nice sector-wise. We are not a sector-specific organization, so that is why I can't talk about child rights or gender rights or other issues and all, but these are part of an integrated here, because we believe that the people's organization should be able to address all these issues in their particular area, and we need to provide and handhold them in getting these support and technicalities and all. So I will stop here. I know it's a lot of time has already passed. So thank you very much, all of you. And thank you, Harsh, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jainji. Very nice, very precise presentation. Actually, you know, we are also on one hand, we are talking about this Souvenir, which talks about the achievements of the sector in last 70th year. But along with that, also we are discussing that what are the future challenges and what should be the path of the sector in future. For everyone, say for example, localization is coming up, a very major idea. COVID crisis taught us that partnership and collaborations are very important nowadays. And thirdly, also we have to see that if localization and partnership is the future, what should be also the role of intermediary organizations? I think our Rajesh Bhai is there, and as we all know that he has a very wide spectrum of experience in the sector, and he also is an institutional builder, I believe. We call him for the sector. Rajesh Bhai, if you can highlight more than what article you have written and contributed in this Souvenir, but also would like to hear from you that how you see about the sector. Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, Harsh and Sathiyon. For last 45 minutes, about an hour, I had a meeting at 11:30, unfortunately. So after 12:30, 12:25, I've been listening to all of you. Thank you very much, Amod, Pooja, Vandana, Meenu, and all of you. Don't do many screen sharing. There's nothing to share. Okay, this document, please remove. I want to see people's faces. Thank you, Dheeraj. Very fascinating, very important conversation. मैं तो सिर्फ दो ही बातें मुझे ध्यान में आई, वो कहने की जरूरत है. पहली चीज ये कि मैं आपको एक उदाहरण देता हूं जो मेरी जिंदगी में स्वैच्छिक प्रयासों से सबसे पहले जुड़ा था. राजस्थान में मैं महिलाओं की लिटरेसी प्रोग्राम की, ग्रामीण महिलाओं की लिटरेसी प्रोग्राम में सभा मंदिर की मदद करता था और मोस्टली लिटरेसी इंस्ट्रक्टर्स की ट्रेनिंग करता था और साथ में बैठता था. उसके करने के दौरान, ये 78-79 की बात है, प्रिया का जन्म नहीं हुआ था. उसके करने के दौरान हम लोगों को ये लगा कि जो मॉडल सरकार ने उन्हें दिया हुआ था चलाने के लिए, उसमें क्या था कि मिनिमम 25 महिलाएं होनी चाहिए, वो सब प्रौढ़ होनी चाहिए. प्रौढ़ की परिभाषा थी 18 से उम्र. वहां पे 12 साल की लड़कियां भी आ रही थी, कभी 17 लोग थे, 25 नहीं होते थे. तो ये जो एक्सपीरियंस था while doing this work, उस एक्सपीरियंस के बेसिस पे कई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने मिलके, हम लोगों ने भी मिलके एक नोट बनाया और कहा कि ये जो आपका योजना है इसको और फ्लेक्सिबल बनाने की जरूरत है. इंक्लूजन तब होगा, नहीं तो एक्सक्लूजन हो रहा है. तो इसको हम आज की भाषा में कह सकते हैं प्रोग्राम को रेलेवेंट बनाने के लिए एडवोकेसी. और वो सक्सेसफुल हुई, 1.5 साल चली. पर मार्च 1980 में जब नई सरकार बनी तो एक टेलीग्राम सबको भेज दिया गया, सेवा मंदिर को भी आया, सारे देश भर के स्वैच्छिक संगठनों को आया कि भाई ऐसा है, अब ये स्कीम बंद कर दी गई. अब आपको पता है 1980 के जनवरी में कौन सी सरकार बनी थी, और आप में से हो सकता है कई लोगों को टेलीग्राम मिला हो, अभी शायद रखा भी हो आपके फाइल्स में. बड़ा रोचक टेलीग्राम था. सरकार ने ओवरनाइट फैसला किया कि ये जो स्वैच्छिक संगठन काम कर रहे हैं ये रोक दिया जाए, और उनका हम खुद करेंगे. खैर, समय बदलता है, लोग बदलते हैं. सैम पिट्रोदा जी आ गए राजीव गांधी के जमाने में, और लिटरेसी मिशन की बात होने लगी. 1986 में नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का रिव्यू हुआ. बोडिया जी एजुकेशन सेक्रेटरी थे. कई लोग आप में से जुड़े रहे होंगे, मैं भी जुड़ा हुआ था. तो जब नेशनल लिटरेसी मिशन बना तो पिट्रोदा जी ने कहा कि भाई हमें टेक्नोलॉजी के बेसिस पे स्टैंडर्डाइज करना है. तो कुछ लोगों ने उनको कहा कि वो तो बहुत अच्छा आइडिया है सर, एफिशिएंसी उसी से बढ़ती है, पर चक्कर ये है कि मदर टंग तो बहुत है इस देश में, शुरू कहाँ से होगा? पहाड़िया से शुरू होगा कि गुजराती से शुरू होगा कि मराठी से शुरू होगा कि तमिल तेलुगु? मतलब जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भाषाएं हैं वो नहीं बोलते लोग और बोलते हैं 40-50 भाषाएं, भोजपुरी वगैरह वगैरह, संताली 50। तो उनको भी समझ में आया कि ये एफिशिएंसी, नेशनल प्रोजेक्ट, नेशनल मिशन, इसको ट्वीक करने की जरूरत है। आज की भाषा में अपन कहते हैं ट्वीक करने की जरूरत, और वो हुआ और उसके परिणाम रीजनेबली अच्छे आए। मैं उस मिशन के काफी देर तक 1993-94 तक उसमें सक्रिय रहा, इसलिए मैं ये उदाहरण आपको एक दे रहा हूं। दूसरा उदाहरण दे रहा हूं कि जब 73rd 74th अमेंडमेंट बने, तो उनके बनने के बाद हम लोगों ने कहा कि भाई ये तो बहुत अच्छा मौका है, महिलाएं और शेड्यूल कास्ट शेड्यूल ट्राइब लोग अब अपना प्रतिनिधित्व कर सकते हैं और एक तरह से वो सरकार गवर्नेंस चलाने में अपना योगदान दे सकते हैं। पर यह तय हुआ कि भाई इनको थोड़ा सा ओरिएंट करने की जरूरत वगैरह वगैरह है। तो आप में से कई लोगों ने पंचायतों में काम किया, पर 1995 में जब हमने पहली बैठक बुलाई और स्वर्गीय एलसी जैन उसमें बैठे हुए थे जो काफी प्रणेता थे इस चीज के, तो हमारे जितने भी जान पहचान के रीजनेबल साइज के स्वैच्छिक संगठन थे सबको हमने बुलाया। कई लोग आए, 30-40 लोग, पर अधिकांश लोगों ने ये कहा कि भाई हम उनको, ये तो राजनीतिक मामला है, हम उनको ट्रस्ट कैसे कर सकते हैं और उसमें ये होगा वो होगा। और तब तक क्या हुआ था कि सहभागिता की आड़ में हम लोगों ने सहभागिता की बात 82-83 से जोरदार करी, तो सारे राष्ट्रीय कार्यक्रमों में, चाहे वो शिक्षा का हो चाहे स्वास्थ्य का हो, एक सहभागिता कमेटी बनाने का काम शुरू हो गया था। जैसे आजकल सारे कार्यक्रमों में सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप बनाने का काम शुरू हो गया। तो सहभागिता कमेटी में उसको चलाना, चाहे वाटरशेड कमेटी हो चाहे एजुकेशन कमेटी हो चाहे हो, शुरू में पंचायतों के आने के पहले पंचायतों का कोई योगदान नहीं था, समझ में आता है, पर अब वो बन गई, स्टैट्यूटरी इंस्टीट्यूशन बन गए। अब या तो आप उनको इग्नोर कर दीजिए, वो अपनी कमेटी अलग चलाएंगे, या उनको जोड़ लीजिए, उनके साथ आगे बढ़िए। तो वो जो इनिशियल रेजिस्टेंस था वो एक तरह से ये था कि भाई हम कहाँ राजनीति में दलदल में फंसेंगे, नौकरशाही से काम करके चल सकता है। पर आज देखिए आप कितने सारे स्वैच्छिक संगठन इस काम में लगे हुए हैं। जिस चीज को आज फाइनेंस कमीशन, जीपीडीपी और फलाना डिमाका कर रहा है, उस सब की शुरुआत हमारे जैसे सैकड़ों ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने स्थान पे जमीन पे करके दिखाई। तब जीपीडीपी कंपलसरी नहीं था, पर माइक्रो प्लानिंग करते थे और कई जगह उसके अच्छे उदाहरण बने। ये दोनों उदाहरण मैं इसलिए दे रहा हूं कि मैं व्यक्तिगत रूप को इसको जानता हूं, डिटेल में समझता हूं और अनुभव किया हुआ है कि इन दोनों अनुभवों में कभी उतार कभी चढ़ाव, और कभी सिर्फ सर्विस डिलीवरी जो अमोद जी कह रहे थे, और कभी सर्विस डिलीवरी के आधार पर जो अनुभव आया उसको लेकर प्रोग्राम या उसके पीछे वाली नीति को प्रभावित करने का काम, जो पूजा जी ने कहा, वंदना जी ने भी बोला। तो ये अगर हम सब लोग जो इस मंच पे बैठे हुए हैं, जूम पे बैठे हुए हैं, हमारे अलावा भी हजारों लोग हैं इस देश में जो लंबे दौड़ने वाले, हम लोग कोई स्प्रिंटर नहीं है। मतलब स्प्रिंटर होते तो अब तक सांस फूलने लगती, हम लोग तो सुपर मैराथन वाले खिलाड़ी हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि हमारी नजर, हमारी दिशा, हमारा कमिटमेंट वो लॉन्ग टर्म है, लंबा है। अपने इंस्टीट्यूशन की बात मैं नहीं कर रहा, मैं इस समय व्यक्तियों की बात कर रहा हूं। तो इसलिए आप सबके अनुभव में, मेरे अनुभव में ऊपर नीचे तो होती रहती है, और ये भी निश्चित है कि सर्विस प्रोविजन के किसी भी क्षेत्र में जिस वर्ग के लिए हम सर्विसेज के अधिकार की बात कर रहे हैं उस तक अच्छे ढंग से, ईमानदारी से सर्विसेज पहुंचने के लिए आवश्यक है कि हम सर्विस प्रोग्राम और उसके पीछे की पॉलिसी को प्रभावित करें। क्योंकि देश इतना डाइवर्स है कि एक ही गोली सबके लिए नहीं लगने वाली, भले ही शॉर्ट टर्म में ऐसे लगे कि एक ही गोली से सबका काम चल रहा है। तो इसलिए आप अगर लंबे समय हम लोग काम करेंगे तो सर्विसेज के साथ साथ सरकार के कार्यक्रमों, सोच, नीतियों को प्रभावित करना स्वाभाविक है। अब प्रश्न यह है कि कभी मौका आता है और कभी नहीं आता। तो मैं तो इस बात को मानता हूं कि जब ठंडी हवा चलती है तो अपन जैकेट पहन लेते हैं, और जब धूप आती है तो शॉर्ट स्लीव में घूमते हैं। इसलिए मुझे नहीं लगता कि हमें बहुत चिंता करने की जरूरत है। मुझे लगता है कि हमें स्थानीय स्तर पर जो हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, सभी लोग कर रहे हैं, और कोविड के दौरान उस स्थानीय काम का और स्थानीय नेतृत्व का महत्व सबको देखा, देश को देखा, विदेश को देखा, सबको देखा, उस काम को मजबूती देना आवश्यक है। अब रही बात ये कि हमारे संगठन और हमारी संस्थाएं किस ढंग से आगे बढ़ेंगी कि नहीं बढ़ेंगी, तो भाई मैं तो आप जानते हैं मैनेजमेंट का स्टूडेंट रहा हूं। मैं तो हमेशा ये एग्जांपल देता हूं कि बहुतेरी बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां ऐसी भी हैं जो 30-40 साल बाद डिसअपियर हो जाती हैं, पर वो जो छाप छोड़ के जाती हैं वो आने वाली कंपनियां लेके जाती हैं। तो मेरे दिमाग में प्रश्न ये नहीं है कि प्रिया कितने दिन चलेगा और कितना चलेगा, कितने लोग उसमें काम करेंगे। प्रश्न ये है कि हमारी सार्थकता और हमारा योगदान समयानुकूल परिस्थिति के अनुसार कैसा चल रहा है। और मैं मानता हूं कि हजारों लाखों लोग हैं हमारे इस कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाने वाले, वो अपने ढंग से करें, वो अपनी सोच से करें, और हम अगर संविधान के मूल्यों को, अपने 75 वर्ष के यात्रा के मूल्यों को, उससे पहले होने वाले स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के मूल्यों को नजर में रखें और उनसे दिशा न हटाएं, उनसे अपना आत्मीयता का संबंध बनाए रखें, तो टैक्टिकली दाएं बाएं घूम जाना अगर सामने से बहुत तेज हवा आ रही है वो कोई तकलीफ की बात नहीं है। पर हौसला, और मुझे लगता है कि जो सेक्टर की बैशिंग वगैरह होती है उसका एक ही इलाज है, जैसे ये वाणी ने अच्छा किताब निकाली, मुझे लगता है कि बड़े बड़े जो 10-12 प्रोग्राम हैं देश में या मुद्दे कहलाते हैं, उन मुद्दों पे एक 75 वर्ष की यात्रा का एक संकलन वाणी जैसे लोगों को निकालना चाहिए। अभी एक नई किताब और निकली है 75 ईयर्स, जिसमें कई लोगों ने, आप लोगों ने भी योगदान दिया है। तो इस तरह के डॉक्यूमेंट निकालना कि भाई हिस्ट्री में क्या हुआ, जिससे कि आजकल जो नई हवा चली है कि इतिहास हमसे शुरू होगा, उसको थोड़ा सा रोका जा सके। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सब लोगों का, और विशेषतः वाणी के साथियों का। नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद राजेश भाई। एज यूजुअल हमेशा जब भी आपको सुनते हैं तो नई बातें सीखने को मिलती है और मोटिवेशन भी काफी मिलता है। लेकिन आपने बहुत अच्छा बताया। मेरे को लगता है कि जो टेक्निकल फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी की जो सिचुएशन आपने बताई है, मेरे को लगता है वो आज के दिन के लिए, आज के समय के लिए क्या हमेशा ही जरूरी रही है। वहाँ हमारे सेक्टर में आपको याद होगा, आपने तो हेल्थ एंड सेफ्टी में काम किया हुआ है, वहां भी इसी तरीके से ही काम होते थे। तो बहुत अच्छा आपने बताया। जो आपने वो 10-12 प्रोग्राम्स की बात की है, मैं कहूंगा शबीन जी को भी कि वो आप सबसे संपर्क करके आइडेंटिफाई करें 10-12 प्रोग्राम। और क्योंकि ये एक मौका है, इसमें जैसा उस दिन हम लोग चर्चा कर रहे थे कि तूफान में नाविक अपने नेट की रिपेयरिंग करता है, तो ये रिपेयरिंग ही प्रोसेस है कि हमने पास्ट में किए हुए काम को अच्छे से डॉक्यूमेंट कर सके, ताकि वो डॉक्यूमेंट जो है वो आगे आने वाले समय में लोगों को भी पता लगे कि हुआ क्या था, क्योंकि पब्लिक डोमेन में इंफॉर्मेशन है नहीं। तो ये बहुत अच्छा सजेशन दिया राजेश भाई, हम लोग उसको आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे। और मैं साथियों से कहूंगा, क्योंकि वो 10-12 जो आइडेंटिफाइड प्रोग्राम्स भी होंगे, उनमें जो आज ही मीटिंग में लोग हैं, इन्हीं लोगों ने ही उसमें कंट्रीब्यूट किया है। तो मुझे लगता है उनकी गाइडेंस में हम उसको एक बढ़िया सा डॉक्यूमेंट बनाए। क्योंकि हम लोग, आपको पता ही है, वानी में हम लोग सब्जेक्ट की मास्टरी पे कभी क्लेम नहीं करते। हम लोग सिर्फ वो कहते प्रोसेस करने वाले लोग हैं, लेकिन जो टेक्निकल नो हाउ है, जो उसकी डिटेल्स है, वो सब हम आपसे पूछेंगे। और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सबका। हमको बड़ा ये चैलेंजिंग लग रहा था सुबह से, कि कल से चिंता ये हो रही थी कि सेक्टर के सारे सीनियर लीडर्स इस सेशन में आ रहे थे, इस मीटिंग में आ रहे थे, जो ऑनलाइन मीटिंग में, कैसे हम उनको का योगदान हम समेट पाएंगे, क्योंकि इतना ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन मिलने वाली थी। लेकिन बहुत अच्छा लगा और बहुत मजा आया बातचीत सुन के। मेरे को लगता है हमारे साथी जो और भी जुड़े हैं इस जूम में, उनको भी बहुत मजा आया होगा। हम लोग कोशिश करेंगे जो अब रिकॉर्डिंग किए हुए डॉक्यूमेंट भी बना सकें। सो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, और अब आप लोग सब लंच कीजिए। थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, थैंक यू एवरीवन, थैंक यू।
Thanks, Harsh. It's a great initiative. It's very, very important.
थैंक यू सर।
थैंक यू हर्ष भाई, थैंक यू हर्ष भाई,
थैंक यू,
बहुत अच्छा लगा।
Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you, Harsh. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
Thank
VANI
you,
team.
Vijay.
Thank you, all the speakers. Wonderful to meet all of you.
Thank you, Mr.
Hearing all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Harjatri ji.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, can you just circulate the event link?
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Respected
WhatsApp में भेज दो,
members.
WhatsApp में भेज दो।
हेलो,
Hello.
हाँ मधुकर जी, धन्यवाद।
हर्ष भाई प्लीज ये पूरा जो प्रेजेंटेशन था वो भेजने का प्रयास करे तो अच्छा रहेगा।
ठीक है, हाँ।
थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू। थैंक यू धीरज, थैंक यू कविता, थैंक यू एवरीवन।
Hello. Hello.
शिव कुमार जी, हेलो सर।
Thank you, Harsh. Meeting was
Thank you,
good.
sir. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.